Hello creative coders, this is a video where I'm going to be talking about using p5.js to make something that look like ripples in water. This is a exercise or an assignment for my DGST 302 creative coding class, but it's on YouTube, so I guess anybody can watch it. This is where I'm headed. This is my example that I completed, and this is the kind of thing I can show you how to make in the video that's going to follow, so stick around and watch the whole thing if you want to. This is mine, and like I said, it is mine, but it is not perfect. I think I might end up tweaking a little bit, but this is ultimately where we're headed. Now this is part of my class, and so we are at the point where we are looking at JavaScript in a more object-oriented way, hopefully. That means a couple things. Now that we'll need a few things for this exercise. First of all, we're going to talk about the mouse pressed event, which is the thing that triggers everything. It's when you click somewhere, it's going to capture the X and Y coordinates of that click, and then that's going to be important because it's like we're dropping that click in a pond, and we want to see that click kind of spread out like some concentric circles. And then in order to do this, we're going to have to talk about objects and classes. Objects and classes really go together when we're talking about this kind of programming, so can't really do, well, I was about to say you can't do one without the other. You could do objects totally by themselves, but this is going to be a lot easier to do. It's going to make a lot more sense, hopefully, if we do these together. And essentially what's happening every time I click is it's making a new member of a class called Ripple, and it's then performing the things that a ripple does from that position on. And each of these ripples that I create is autonomous. It knows where it is and it knows what to do with that space, and it makes this kind of nice, kind of pleasing effect. So that's where we're headed. Yeah, let's get in and do some coding. Here I am in my typical coding setup. I've got the sketch, well, over there. I've got the sketch code running over there. I've got, well, not running, I've got it editing over there, and then I've got the sketch running behind me. I'm kind of amidst the pond or the body of water that I'm going to be creating here in a moment. And I'm just going to be coding things on the left and then saving it, then refreshing on the right to see how I'm doing that. I'm doing this in my creative coding repository and in the folder 3.3.ripples. And as usual, make sure you clean things up if you need to in the index.html file that goes with that, and open the appropriate sketch.js file. And I'm going to go ahead and hide my sidebar because I don't need that in Sublime Text anymore, and now I'm just here in coding. So I'm going to kind of do this in sort of the non-object oriented way first, and then you'll see how far that gets me, and then see where I need to actually start adding this object oriented stuff here. I'm going to try to keep this as brief as I can. We'll see how it goes. It's late at night and I'm tired, and I tend to ramble when I get tired, so we'll see how this goes. So first of all, I actually want to make this canvas look a little different. I think the gray background doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And by the way, I hope the music's okay in the background. I can see the audio, but I can't actually hear it, so it looks like it's at a level that's pretty low. I just wanted to make some pleasing, relaxing, lo-fi background music, and I found a royalty-free track here on YouTube. So anyways, I'm going to make this look more like a pond. Right now it's just sort of this gray concrete, I guess. That doesn't seem like something that's going to be very interesting to click on or have ripples in. So I'll give it a background color. I'll just say the background is going to be RGB, so I'll just say, let's keep it fairly dark still, like 80, 150 maybe. See how that looks. And yeah, that's pretty good. It's like a dark blue. It looks a little bit lavender for some reason, but it's, bluish, whatever we want to call that. All right, so that's pretty good. And then what I'm going to do is start putting some ripples in here. So I'm going to be clicking. I want this to respond whenever I click, and so that means I need a special function. I need the mouse pressed function, and this is going to be something that only happens. This is going to fire off whenever the mouse is clicked. So this is a function that only runs in that special circumstance. So you could also call this an event. So this is an event that happens whenever I click, 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 click. Mouse pressed is running, even though I don't have any code there yet. That's actually what's running whenever I click, click, click on the pond. So I want something to happen here, but first of all, I want to make sure that I can actually see something happening. So let's create a variable, a couple of variables. We'll say, I'll just say, I'm going to name these things in a way that I will end up changing later, but just while I'm doing this to make it really clear what I'm doing, let's make ripple X and ripple Y. I've been looking at this example for a while now, so like the word ripple has gotten to that point where it doesn't seem right to me. It doesn't seem like that could possibly be a word in the English language, but it actually is. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to draw, this is like my standard debugging thing I like to do. I'm going to go ahead and draw Oops. I'm going to do a push and pop here just to isolate my debugging stuff, which I probably won't need for very long. And push and pop before and after some drawing instructions will just make these instructions temporary. This is going to be helpful because I'm going to need to set my fill to be white, and I don't want to keep it white. All right, so almost there, push and pop, and then what I want it to say is, okay, what is ripple x right now? So ripple underscore x colon, just typing this as a string and then using plus to concatenate the actual value of this at 50/50, we'll say. And this will end up being pretty small on the screen, but it's fine. And then this is just to have some kind of visual clue that what I did worked. There we go. So pretty basic stuff here. This is printing the string ripple x, and then whatever the current value of ripple x is. And then this is printing the string ripple y, and then whatever the current value of ripple y is. So let's save that, refresh it, make sure that that does work. It does. I'm just gonna add a little bit of space there for some clarity. Go ahead and make this text larger just because I can. And why not? And just need to give myself a little bit more room for that one. There we go. So now we can see it very large and clear. Ripple x and ripple y both 0 because they haven't. That's all I've done. I've set them to both to 0, and there's nothing, like, no way to change them. They aren't changing it anyway. But that's what's going to happen when I add that ability here in mouse pressed. So I want to say now that mouse has been pressed, you know, that's the logic of this. I'm going to say ripple x is now going to equal mouse x, and ripple y. This word is now going to equal mouse y. So now when I go over here and refresh, these values change every time I click, which is what I wanted. That's what I expected, and that's what I wanted, and it's what I need if I want to start drawing circles. Because the idea here is drawing circles. Whenever I click, I want there to be a click, and I want it to start a circle right where I clicked, and then I want that circle to expand outward, moving on like that. So this is p5.js, and so you know the draw function runs on a loop. It's running 60 times a second, and to create the appearance of animation, all you have to do is change something, usually something incrementally in that draw loop. And in this case, this is something that has the same center every time, these ripples, right? But they get bigger. So all I need to do is, I know the x and y for these. I just got that anyway with ripple x, ripple y. And what I want to do then is start drawing a circle at that x and y. Start it off as a 0 width circle, but then increase the size of that circle. So let's try that here. I'm going to go ahead and make a new variable called ripple d, I guess. I'll call it ripple d for this one. That's going to be my diameter. I'm going to increase that throughout the draw loop. And I will go ahead and keep my debug stuff there so I can see it. And what I'll do is just draw a circle. So circle at ripple x over ripple y, and I'm going to set its diameter to ripple d. So hopefully you remember how circles go. The first one is the x position of the center of the circle if you're in the standard circle mode. Then ripple y is the y position, so wherever you are on the Cartesian plane of the sketch. And then the third value is what is the diameter of that circle going to be, the width and the height. And if you want to have an oblong kind of shape, you could set that differently or whatever. But this is just going to be a circle, so I'm just going to use those three values there. All right, and just actually let me just make sure that this works as I think it does. This is, you know, good to kind of just double check your stuff here. I'm going to just make it so, you know, I haven't added any iteration yet. It's just going to draw that circle wherever I click. So, you know, pretty good, right? So this is still doing what I expected it to do, is drawing a circle wherever I click. Now it's a white circle with a white filled in circle. I don't care for that, so I'm going to go ahead and change the stroke to, I kind of like the white on this background, so I'll keep the stroke white, and then I will say stroke weight. I'll go ahead and give this a little bit more weight so it's easier to see as it starts working. Do 5. And I'm going to set the fill, I'm going to set no fill. I'm going to say just make that a transparent circle, or an empty circle, if you will. So go over here. So now these circles appear like that wherever I click. So and it, you know, it made this stroke weight is keeping the heavy weight stroke for the text, which makes it hard to read. So let me go ahead and turn that stroke weight down. That should be That's better. Okay. So yeah, again, not concentric expanding circles yet, and actually just the one circle at a time, which is going to be an issue, but let's change it here. So ripple D, remember, that's the diameter. I'm going to have it, I do want it to start at 0, but I want it to expand. I want it to increase as the draw loop runs, and then draw the circle after it's increased, so that every time the draw loop's running 60 times a second, it's going to get slightly bigger, slightly bigger, slightly bigger, slightly bigger, until it's so big I can't see anything except the circle. So I'm going to say ripple D, and I'll use plus equals, which is the incrementer operator, to take this up by whatever value I say next. And I'll just try 1, see what happens if I start at 0 and go through 1. So by 60 it should be 60. So yeah, after a second it should be 60 pixels wide. That seems about right to me. So let's see how that looks. Yeah, okay. Oh, but there's something else happening. You see what else is happening? The circle doesn't start over again. The circle gets bigger every time. It gets bigger. It's just like the same circle, but it's bigger and bigger because it's still using that ripple D value. So I need to do more every time mouse is pressed. I don't want to just reset the X and Y to wherever mouse X and mouse Y is. I need to set the diameter back to 0 because this is a new, a new thing that's happening. So a new ripple is happening. Yep, there we go. And it does look pretty good. There is of course one issue, which is that every time I click, it resets. And so if once I like this circle, but if I click over here, a new ring is now growing, but the old one's gone. So that's not how ponds work. I don't know if you've looked at a pond recently, but when you make a ripple, or someone throws a rock in one part and someone else throws a rock in another part, you're going to see both ripples at the same time. It doesn't reset every time something new hits the surface of the water. That would be a very strange pond. So that's not what we're doing here. We want to make this actually so that multiple circles can exist at the same time. We don't know how many we're going to have. I'm making this interactive, so I can send you the sketch and you can just click like crazy. I want to make sure that that works for you if you go like crazy, and also it works for me if I just click once. So I have an unpredictable number of circles that need to coexist, an unpredictable number of ripplers, we'll say, that's the term I'm using in my mind, to make sure that these are all going to be behaving independently of each other. So, they will interact visually, like we'll see them overlap eventually, but they don't actually need to know about each other. They just need to know about themselves. They need to know where their center is and where their circle is going, like how far along their diameter is as they spread out. So this is the point where we need to switch to a more object-oriented approach. And this does take a few steps before we see the result, but trust me, it's going to be better. So let's continue with what we have here. I'll comment out some things and add in some new things instead. So first of all, like I said, we don't know how many ripplers there are going to be. I'm calling these ripplers. I feel like that's, again, that word just sounds weird to me. I don't know why. So but I'm going to make a list of ripplers. This is an empty array, and you don't have to initialize it this way, but I am just to kind of help me remember that that's what this is. So it's an empty array. Square brackets indicate that this is an array. An array is going to be a list of all of the ripplers. They're going to be, I'm going to create them, but they're going to then become part of this list, and that's going to be how I know where they are, and I can give them instructions to follow those instructions. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is create a class called a rippler, and so that will be what these little circles, expanding concentric circles, are called. These are ripplers, and so I'm going to make a class that's going to generate objects. Remember, going back to my initial slide there, classes and objects go together, they work together in this approach, and so I haven't made any objects yet, but I'm going to make a factory that makes objects. That's what this class is going to be. So this is a new kind of syntax. It's declared using this special keyword class, and I'm going to say class equals, and then this part I'm starting with the capital R. Okay. I don't know what that is. I'll look at that later. Okay, thanks. So this is, classes are initialized with a name like any other variable or other kind of object, but the special thing about a class is that it's got a capital letter to begin with, and that's unique for classes. It's a way, classes are so important that it makes sense to have them, stand out in this way. So this is class, and I'm going to call it rippler, singular. I don't know if this is more or less clear actually to make the singular and plural, but I like it this way because it kind of clarifies that I'm making ripplers here with this thing. This thing is a thing that makes a rippler, and then this is a thing that stores the ripplers. I don't know. Words are strange this late at night. Okay, so I'm making this here. This is a class that I'm calling rippler, and a class is a special kind of object actually that has to have certain things in it. One thing it does have to have is a constructor. So a constructor is like a private little function in here, and it acts and looks a lot like a function. You know, these are all functions here, except this is a specially expected one that every class should have. You can have other methods, and I will be adding another one here in a minute, but at this point I'm just constructing ripplers. So I just need to think about construction at this point. And once you're inside of an object, you know, again, I have to kind of talk through this a bit before I type it out here, but the idea is that it's going to have its own, because remember I've just defined this one global ripple x ripple y, so every time I'm clicking ripple x ripple y, I need a new definition. What I'm trying to create here instead is a rippler, which is something that can have its own private x and its own private y and its own private diameter, and some other stuff too that'll probably come in handy. And in order to do that, it takes a special syntax using the this dot syntax. But first of all, let's actually feed the constructor the information that it needs in order to you know, make itself get started. So you notice how when we started this off, so again, this is just the one at a time rippler without even using that name here. It's using mouse x and mouse y and 0. So this is information that it needs, and I'm calling out the x, the y, and the d. So whenever what I want to do here, instead of just setting those values in here, this is my signal to start building a new rippler, and I'm going to call that signal by using this structure here, and I'm going to scroll up a bit so you can see it. I'm going to say it uses the keyword new. I'm going to say new rippler, and I'm going to, in parentheses, provide this information that I know I'm going to need. So mouse x, mouse y, and 0. Although the zero is kind of redundant because I know it's always going to be 0, so I don't need that here. I can use that in the constructor when I construct it. Now I can't just call new in the middle of nowhere. I'm making a new thing, which is called a rippler, so I need to put that rippler somewhere. And so remember I made that ripplers list earlier, and so all I need to do is push that new rippler onto it. The push method will add a new item onto that list. Okay, so there we are. Actually, let me get my word wrap on here so I can actually see things without scrolling left and right. So this is it, right? So I'm going to make a new rippler, and good time to double check things. I don't need this code anymore, so actually no, I'll leave it. I'll leave that code here because it's not going to hurt anything while it's there. And in this case, the debugging part of it is a little hard to type out, so I'm going to actually just pull up my browser console. This is Firefox, and so I can see it here. And if this worked, I should just be able to type in the thing that I want, which are the ripplers array, and it should print out the current value of the ripplers array. It's empty now, but that's fine because I haven't told it to what a rippler consists of yet. I've just told it to make them, and I can see that it actually is making them. So if I click, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, I should expect it to be 7 ripplers now in my rippler array. I know it's kind of small, but this bit right behind me, this browser console, is showing me that it succeeded in creating those 7 ripplers and sticking them together in that array. So that's good news. I'm glad to see that. So I would have had to stop this and start all over again if that didn't work, because I don't know why it wouldn't have worked. Okay, so remember when I send the instructions to the class and I'm saying, hey rippler class, make me a rippler, I fed it the mouse x and the mouse y, and it's going to take that information as input and then do something with it. I'm going to call that input x and y here, and this is actually just a temporary place to call it that. And then I'm going to go ahead down in here, and you know, I always feel like this is extra explicit and redundant. I don't know if it is actually, but it's what I do and it seems to work, so I'm not gonna question it now. So I'm going to say x and y are the names of the parameters as they come into this constructor, and then I'm going to attach them to the this.x and this.y private properties of this of the rippler that is being constructed right here. So remember, I need this x and this y. I also need the this.d, which I'm going to always set to 0 to begin with. So I don't need to have that coming in as a parameter. It's just always 0 to begin with. Okay, so again, let's go back here, double check. And again, I don't have anything in the, I don't have any, nothing, these aren't being drawn yet, but I now can see that I do have the information. I clicked 4 times and I have 4 of these, and I'm making this bigger so hopefully you can see that's all over here. You can see how these are spread out. So this is telling me that, okay, this is, each of these elements in the array is an object. Each of these objects has a private variable called d, which is 0. This one has a private x, which is called 298, or set to 298. This one has one called y, set to 159. So each of these is unique and like contained. So these are things that go together. So this 0 and this 298 and this 159, all of those 3 are properties shared by object number 0. And object number 1 has its own private set of each of these. Object number 2, 3, and 4, however many I make of these, which I can do just by clicking now, is going to end up with its own private sets of these. I don't need to remember them because it's all being in, it's all, you know, it knows those things. It has its own kind of internal memory or logic for this. So we're getting pretty close to this actually working. And so I don't actually need this debug stuff here, so I'll comment it out for now just to kind of make a more, you know, tranquil kind of scene here. And I'm also going to do a couple of, so I'm going to also turn off my, this is also my debug circle drawing stuff here. So all this stuff is basically commented out, just double checking, just leaving the background, the bluish color, stroke is white, stroke is 5, no fill, so these are concentric circles. Okay, good. So what I want to do now, instead of like just calling this generic function circle and then drawing generic x, generic y, generic ripple x, generic ripple y, generic ripple d, is I want to call each circle's private x, y, and d, but together, so that they happen at the same, in the same instance. And that's something I can do here by adding a method to my rippler. So remember, my rippler class constructs these rippler objects, and it adds these properties x, y, and d. The cool thing about the way that objects work is that properties, you can add your own methods. You can add your own bit of code that runs as part of this rippler's knowledge about itself and how it should behave in the world and how it should behave in relation to other objects. Maybe this is how you would do collision detection between objects if you had things bouncing around. So I'm going to call this one draw. I hesitated about this. Maybe I wasn't sure if I should call it draw because we already have the draw loop, but I think this makes sense to me. I actually called it something else when I did this code earlier, so I hope that it was okay to call this draw. And what I'm going to do here is call the drawing. I mean, I know how to draw circles, except in this case I'm using this dot x because I need to draw this dot, you know, this where it is, this dot x, this dot y, and this dot d. And just like I did in the main draw loop when I just had the one, I was just using these generic global variables. You know, I need to iterate. So this dot d plus equals 1, and it's now going to hopefully draw that. So let me just double check here. So calling this draw method, I don't know if I actually need to give the draw method parameters. I don't think I do. So let's just see. Now, you know, there is this overall global draw function that's still there. That's the main draw function that's part of p5.js. Definitely don't want to change or modify that. But what I want to do is make this draw function call each of the Rippler's draw functions one at a time. And when we say one at a time, that means we're doing some iteration. So I've got this list of Ripplers, and what I want to do is march my way down that list. You saw that list here a minute ago. So I want to be able to go down this list one at a time and run each of these Rippler's draw functions one at a time. And when I go one at a time, that means iteration. There is a more kind of ECMAScript way to do this, a more ES6 way to do this, but I still like doing it the old-fashioned way, which is probably not efficient in terms of, you know, memory and stuff, but probably other reasons not to do it this way. But since we're still kind of getting used to iteration and some concepts in this class, I think it makes sense. So in this case, I'm making a for loop. A for loop you will recall from the quilt exercise, from the grid emulation exercise, from several other things. I'm calling my iterator here just I, because that's all it's doing, is it's just iterating. And I'm going to iterate it up to the length of the ripplers. So however long that is, it's going to keep going until it runs out of those, and it's going to move, iterating by 1. So I know this is kind of like, I've got my font pretty large here, so that's why it's wrapped around there like that. But this is going to now visit every one of the elements in the ripplers list, and each time it visits that one, it's going to be at the index position I. So I call that inside of the loop by referencing ripplers and then square brackets I. And then all I need to do, I just need to call the draw function by name. So draw with the parentheses after that says that's the way that you tell the function to invoke and do its thing. So I think this is ready to work. Let's find out. Hey, there we go. So now I can make a bunch of these. And that's pretty good. I mean, it's kind of tranquil, kind of peaceful, and kind of interesting. You get these cool like interaction patterns as these things move around within this. So yeah, I mean, that's the essence of this exercise. If you can get this far, then that's really that's the minimal part of the exercise. Now for students in my class, I hope you take this a couple steps further at least. I've suggested several things in the instructions for today. You can do things like, instead of having one circle appear, what if you had multiple circles appear from that same point? Can you think of how to do that? And I'll give you how I did that, which is, I won't code it out here because it's kind of wonky, but what I did was, instead of on mouse pressed making one rippler, I made 12 ripplers or something, I forget how many, but it makes a whole bunch of ripplers, and then it sets them with a little bit of delay. So they start, one starts and then the next one waits. 300 milliseconds is the amount that I found worked pretty well. And the next one is 300 milliseconds after that. So they each have a little timer where they're waiting for the one before them. And then once that one before them is done, it starts the next one. So they actually don't even know about each other. They just have a built-in timer delay. And then once they keep going, they go, they also, I set in a thing that makes the stroke get more faint as it gets bigger, and as the circle gets bigger, using the map function to tie those things together. So little things like that can go a long way in terms of making it look, more interesting, more rich, I guess, in terms of its visual vocabulary. The other thing that I figured out, which I was fairly pleased with, is here, I'll go ahead and I'll go back to my there it is. So back to my example. The other thing that I figured out how to do, which I was happy with, is this thing where the ripples reflect off of the edge. And what I did, I'll go ahead and I'll just talk through it again. I won't be able to show you the code for this because it's kind of wonky, but and not well written. So what I did is, like, whenever this set of each circle as it gets created actually makes 4 ghost copies of itself that are outside of the sketch, outside of the canvas. And so whenever the visible one reaches that edge, it's the ghost one that's to the north, I guess, of the canvas is also reaching that edge from the other side. And so they basically swap places. And so the ones that you can't see that are off the sketch canvas become visible just as the other ones become invisible. And so they overlap each other in a way that looks pretty nice. So I was fairly pleased with that effect. Again, my only real issue with this sketch, I mean, I like the look of it. I could probably tweak that a little bit more. My only concern about it is that it's pretty memory intensive. So, I could look at the way that one thing I think I could do to try to improve the memory would be to have these circles actually destroy themselves, actually delete themselves after they're done being visible. I think that would help save the performance a little bit, but I'm not sure how much. And I did not have time to try that out before I started recording, so I'm not going to do that right now. But anyway, I hope that was interesting or helpful. If you are a student in my class especially, I hope you found that helpful to work through the exercise for week 3, day 3, the Rippler exercise using an object-oriented approach. This object-oriented approach is something that could be pretty useful for other exercises as well, possibly, depending on how you approach it. But at least I hope you see how it was super useful for making this exercise do the thing that, it's really necessary for making this exercise do the thing that I was able to make it do here. So yeah, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and happy coding.